Julian Assange was freed after more than 5 years in prison. The U.S. Department of Justice let him off the hook with time served. Trump has promised to free Ross Albright, a man who was convicted to 4 life sentences for running the online website The Silk Road. But as libertarians and general opponents of tyranny celebrate these victories, don't be fooled. The U.S. gave us back 1 political prisoner, but they're keeping the rest. You, me, and the other 350 million plus American citizens who are victims of their authoritarian regime. Those in the ivory towers, whoever that may be, are operating off of 3 simple rules. Rule number 1, compliance is mandatory. That's right, no dissidents allowed. You either fall in line or fall out. Your opinion on the election was either pro-democracy, Biden won, or anti-democracy, Trump won. Nothing in between. And any dissent would not be tolerated. Enter January 6th. Since then, more than 1,200 people have been charged with a federal crime. Nearly 730 have pleaded guilty to charges, and around 170 have been convicted of at least 1 charge. Out of everyone, about 750 people have been sentenced, almost 2/3 receiving some time behind bars, ranging from a few days up to 22 years in prison. Protests went from needing to make people uncomfortable, as AOC said, to now being classified as an insurrection. They showed you a few idiots pushing and shoving to distract you from the police letting people inside. But hey, those fiery but peaceful protests by Black Lives Matter were fine. But protests at the Capitol, well, those were nothing but violent insurrectionists. Never forget the lockdowns when the government felt that they could tell us whose job was essential and whose wasn't. The same people that closed churches and left liquor stores and abortion clinics open. Those who opposed and dared to question the lockdowns were vilified as conspiracy theorists. Never forget the mask mandates and vaccine mandates we all lived through. Those who refused to comply were shamed as science deniers and anti-maskers. Never forget how Russian collusion in 2016 was propped up by legacy media, while questions about voting in 2020 were considered to be anti-democracy. Their power does not suffice. Controlling a majority of America isn't enough. They lust to control everyone. And when they feel their power tested, they retaliate. Hard. Remember how the Biden administration was censoring people online? Remember when Biden appointed a disinformation czar? Or more recently, how you were told to not believe your own eyes and instead recognize a video as a cheap fake? As the book 1984 says, who controls the past controls the future. Who controls the present controls the past. The people in charge now, Biden's puppet masters, don't want to leave. They need to stay in power to tell you how to view the last 4 years so they can control your future. The powers that be used Biden, and if ditching him fits their narrative, they'll do it. But another one of their authoritarian ilk will take his place. They want to control what you say so they can control what you think. As also quoted in 1984, nothing was your own except the few cubic centimeters in your skull. And the puppet masters in charge, they're coming for that next. Rule number 2, ruled by idiots. Plato is quoted as saying, one of the penalties for refusing to participate in politics is that you end up being governed by your inferiors. Well, after that debate performance, nothing could be more evident. But I want to take it a step further. As Niccolo Machiavelli pointed out, the first method for estimating the intelligence of a ruler is to look at the men he has around him. Again, that doesn't say very much for Biden. First, there's his vice president, Kamala Harris, who doesn't know when to laugh or really when to do anything. Then there's the Secretary of Defense, Lloyd Austin, who stopped showing up to work for a period of time and no one even cared to ask where he was or what he was doing. We also have small-town mayor turned Secretary of Transportation Pete Buttigieg. He couldn't handle being a crossing guard, let alone being in charge of the country's transportation. And don't forget the honorable mentions, like the drag queen kleptomaniac Sam Brinton, who was appointed as Deputy Assistant Secretary of Spent Fuel and Waste Disposition. Then there's the trans admiral Rachel Levine, who was appointed as Assistant Secretary for Health for the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. These people really shouldn't be in charge of anything. They couldn't run a lemonade stand, let alone the country. They're useful idiots, messing things up to drive us into sheer chaos. Biden spazzed out multiple times on live TV, then claimed he was fine and proved it by retreating to Camp David. When he emerged, he went on radio and called himself a black woman. You really can't make this stuff up. You've all seen what's been happening at the border. Migrants have been pouring in at record levels. You've also seen what's happening in the economy. Inflation hit a 40-year high during Biden's administration, and costs are still soaring. The median home price is over $400,000. Right now, people feel like life is too expensive to survive. And let's not forget that a recession is on the way, as the yield curve has been inverted for more than 624 days, the longest on record. And remember, an inverted yield curve has been a near-perfect indicator of every recession since the Great Depression. As things get worse, keep in mind that the people in charge are either too ignorant to know what's going on or too arrogant to care. As George Carlin once said, never underestimate the power of stupid people in large groups. Rule number 3, look over there. Never let a good crisis go to waste. That was a gem that came from former White House Chief of Staff Rahm Emanuel. As eerie as it sounds, it's pretty good advice for tyrants. Normally, that principle is whipped out and put to use when things like 9/11 happen, or the 2008 recession, or the COVID pandemic. That way they have an excuse to exercise draconian powers. But I think that the powers that be are using Biden's permanent stream of brain farts as a way to distract America from what's really happening in this country. They don't want you asking real questions. Just think about everything that has been underreported or not reported at all since the whole Biden debate flop. In the last month, while everyone was tweaking over how the debate would go and then licking their wounds in its aftermath, here's what you've missed. The Wisconsin Supreme Court reinstated unstaffed ballot boxes. A fire broke out at a chicken facility in southern Illinois and killed more than 1 million chickens. The Epstein documents were released, confirming what we all thought, that the prosecutors knew Epstein had raped underage girls, but he gave him a sweetheart deal instead. There's whispers of the bird flu coming back. And then let's not forget how the Surgeon General recently declared firearm violence a public health crisis. But I want you to also remember what happened at the beginning of the Biden administration. There was that big baby formula shortage, and there's an ongoing drug shortage with nearly 350 medications unavailable to the public. Several banks closed last year as well. Your government is sitting by letting babies starve, sick people go without meds, and letting your banking system deteriorate. Most Americans didn't wake up to how the tyrants in charge are wringing out the very last drops of liberty left in this country until COVID happened. But pay attention, because all of this leads to one thing, the thing that they crave second to power: chaos. It was chaos after 9/11 that led to the Patriot Act and the senseless wars in Iraq. It was chaos after the 2008 recession that led to bailouts. And it's chaos during the COVID pandemic that led to tyrannical powers taking over this country. Right now, we're looming on the edge of a financial collapse with this inverted yield curve, another pandemic with the bird flu, and another war, possibly two, with Russia in the Middle East. Don't like it? Think you're not going to put up with it again? Well, they'll just go back to rule number 1 and silence you. No, not online. That was easy. No more Twitter censoring from the White House, no more disinformation czar, no more cheap fakes. They'll just get rid of you one by one, once and for all. Crazy? Well, what if I told you that the Department of Homeland Security was building detention camps in all 50 states? Take a listen to what documentary filmmaker J.J. Carroll recently said.
And her name is Christy Hutcherson, and she runs an organization called Women Fighting for America. But her background was federal contracting, and more specifically, abroad, but specifically, she worked on forward operation bases, FOBs, in military war zones, where she would put up these giant soft-sided facilities, water, food, et cetera, et cetera. So we're talking tens of millions, if not billions of dollars, right, that have transferred from her company, which she no longer is a part of, but she has access to all the bid contracts. So I'm interviewing her. And like I said, I have a very good understanding of what the hell's going on in America under this immigration invasion. But when I speak to people that are very dialed in on very specific areas, I'm shocked. And she tells me, and I didn't know this because I don't have access to it. She has access to the federal database where you can go on a website and there are endless bids for contracts from whatever. But she's focusing in on, she says to me, there's bids for detention facilities being built in all 50 states in America.
See what the powers that be did there? They started back on Rule 1 again, no dissidents allowed. This time the tyranny is coming, but it won't be veiled as concern for your safety. While the culture wars over pronouns, gender swapping, and drag queen story hour prevail, your government is busy building detention camps and hiding their plans under the Department of Homeland Security housekeeping budget. While everyone is busy counting debate zingers and arguing over whether men can get pregnant, the tyrants in charge are already planning your demise. Don't be distracted by all the political porn like these silly little debates. The top brass doesn't want to let a good crisis go to waste, but we should. They like to create the chaos. The people are uneducated and scared and then willingly surrender their rights. But like Benjamin Franklin said, those who would give up essential liberty to purchase a little temporary safety deserve neither. So when will you say no? After they draft your sons and daughters to fight their proxy wars? After they make you bail out the banks again? After they force another jab and mask mandate with the next pandemic? After 9/11, we let the government fill us up with their TSA agents, robbing us of our privacy. In 2008, we let the government spend our tax dollars to bail out the banks, robbing us of our very own money. In 2020, we let them mask our mouths and jab our skin, robbing us of our autonomy. Like President Lincoln once said, you can fool all of the people some of the time, and some of the people all of the time, but you cannot fool all of the people all of the time. If we don't wake up and realize what's going on, we'll be proving Lincoln wrong by being forever fools. Mark your calendar for July 25th through 27th. Ladies Love Politics will be attending the Bitcoin 2024 conference. Join me online as I cover the event, or grab a ticket and see for yourself the wonderful world of Bitcoin. Ladies Love Politics is a proud media partner of Bitcoin 2024. In the meantime, be sure to follow the Ladies Love Politics channel on TikTok, YouTube, and Instagram.